It is late on Christmas night, 1943, in the black, heaving Arctic north of Norway. The German battleship Scharnhorst drives into the storm at high speed, bow knifing through freezing spray, hull shuddering with every impact of the sea. At this speed, in this weather, there is no halfway decision. If she slows, the brightest convoy she is hunting will vanish into the snow and darkness. Konteradmiral Erich is already committed to one run, one chance. He does not yet know that somewhere ahead, and somewhere astern, the Royal Navy is quietly closing the trap. Scharnhorst carves through the rough Arctic seas, a dark shape in a darker night, gray hull almost invisible under blowing snow. On the bridge, lit by dim red lamps, Erich stands braced against the motion, gloved hands on the chart table, peering out into the storm through rain. Streaked windows. Somewhere out there to the north, a column of brightish merchant ships is plowing east toward the Soviet Union, carrying fuel, ammunition, and equipment. A soft target on paper. If he can reach them, Kriegsmarine High Command will have their Christmas victory. The ship's radar is his main eye in this blizzard. Outside, the watch officers and lookouts can barely see past the bow. Snow and spray slam against the bridge windows, the wind howls. The sea is a sheet of black muscle, throwing Scharnhorst from crest to trough. Bay glances at the glowing radar repeaters, sparse returns, clutter from the storm, no big warship silhouettes yet. Just empty water and the promise of enemy trade. He leans closer to the glass, listening to the distant rumble of his own engines. Scharnhorst is one of the fastest capital ships afloat. Speed is his advantage. If the British have escorts, he will outrun them, dance around them, destroy the convoy, and disappear into the Arctic night. Then the world outside erupts in white. The bridge is suddenly flooded with a harsh, unnatural light as star shells burst overhead, swinging the night from in, black to ghastly daylight. Harsh shadows carve across the wet steel. Bay's pupils contract painfully. For a moment, no one speaks. He jerks his head toward the illuminated horizon, wiping condensation from the glass. Through the driving snow and the glare of the falling stars, he sees it. Brief orange tongues of fire on the far darkness, low and regular. Muzzle flashes, brightish guns, so the convoy is not alone. On the brightish side, cruisers feel their way through the same storm. Their radar operators have already picked up a fast, hard, contacty shape of a German capital ship. Now with the range closing, they firestar shells high into the sky to turn night into a killing ground. Back on Scharnhorst's bridge, Bay's jaw tightens. He came to smash merchantmen, not duel with well-handled British warships in their own backyard. Battle stations, he snaps, voice flat, decisive. The order cascades down through the ship. But even as the gun's crews rush to their posts, he is already making his call. This is not the fight he wants. Hard to starboard, turn one. 50 degrees, he orders. We break off, we outrun them. The helmsman repeats, hands steady on the wheel. Deep in the hull, the rudders bite. Scharnhorst begins a great sweeping turn, hull leaning into the sea, propellers churning white water as she starts to bend away from the brightest threat. Run but not without a reply. As the ship swings her enormous aft turret, Caesar begins to rotate. Steel groans, mechanisms whine as the heavy triple. Gun mount traverses to bear on the unseen brightish silhouettes in the snow. Caesar ready, comes the report from below. Bay doesn't hesitate. Fire. The German battleship shudders as Caesar unleashes a salvo. The flash from the turret stains the snowstorm orange for a heartbeat. Shells scream away into the night, disappearing into the murk toward those brief, hateful, brightish muzzle flashes. On the brightest cruisers, shells from Scharnhorst hiss into the sea nearby, throwing up vast white geysers of water. Close, but not close enough. Their captains keep course, their own guns answering with cold professionalism. Their fire is accurate, very accurate. A brightest shell comes in on exactly the wrong trajectory for the Germans. It punches into Scharnhorst with a solid, jarring impact that is felt from bow to stern. The whole ship seems to ring. On the bridge, somewhere below and forward, there is a dull boom, a shower of sparks. Lights flicker. Hit, someone shouts. Seconds later, a report crackles up from below, strained, urgent. Radar out. "We've lost the radar." On Bay's bridge, the noise of the storm suddenly feels louder. Without radar in this weather, they are nearly blind. He stares grimly at the darkened repeater. "Keep firing," he snaps. Full power to the engines, make smoke. Below decks, engineers push Scharnhorst's turbines even harder. She surges forward, bow driving deeper into each wave. A thick screen of smoke begins to pour from her funnels and generators, blown sideways by the gale into a spreading gray curtain. Another brightish shell finds its mark. It slams into the German ship with a brutal metallic crack that throws men off their feet. For a second, everyone on the bridge instinctively ducks. Damage report. Bay barks. There is a tense pause. Then a voice comes back from the damage control center. "Superficial damage only, Herr Admiral. No critical systems." Bay exhales once, sharply. "Maintain full power," he orders. "They won't get us." Scharnhorst, now veiled by her own smoke and the bad weather, drives south, pulling away from the first brightish cruisers. Without radar, it becomes a pure speed contest in a chaos of snow, sea, and darkness. On the brightest cruisers, they watch her go on their own instruments. Radar sweeps catching a fast contact fading into increasing range, masked at moments by storm clutter and that spreading smoke screen. Their guns drop silent as the range becomes too long, but they do not give up. They shadow her. Behind him on Scharnhorst, Bay knows exactly what he has lost. That forward radar was his only clear eye. Now he is running blind through the Arctic night, chased by enemies he can no longer see, toward a sea whose dangers he can only imagine. On his chart, the safest path is back south, toward the shelter of Norway and friendly air cover. The convoy will escape, but his ship will survive to fight another day. Reluctantly, weighing pride against preservation, Bay makes his decision. Set course for home waters, he orders. We return to port. His officers nod, some in relief, some in frustration. The helmsman adjusts. Scharnhorst's bow settles on a southerly heading, driving through wind and wave, leaving behind the unseen convoy and the first brightest group. Bay glances into the storm behind, where invisible cruisers are still hunting him. He's confident they can't match his speed forever. Not in this weather, not with Scharnhorst at full power. What he does not know is that those brightest cruisers are not alone. As they follow at long range, their radio transmitters come alive, sending a terse contact report through the Arctic static. Scharnhorst spotted, the message goes out. Course and speed 11, 5 degrees, speed 2, 8 knots. Am shadowing. Far to the south, beyond the curtain of snow and the curve of the radar horizon, another force is waiting in the dark. The main force, there, pushing slowly through the same vicious seas, is the battleship HMS Duke of York, flanked by her escorts. At her head stands Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser, Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, collar up against the cold, eyes on the dim outline of his own ship's bow. He has come in person for this. The Scharnhorst is a prized threat, a fast raider that has haunted Allied convoys. Tonight is his chance to end her. A signalman arrives with the fresh message from the cruisers. Fraser reads the intercepted bearing and speed, the confirmation that the German battleship is now driving almost straight toward his own formation. He allows himself a tight, private smile. "Very good," he murmurs, "we have her." On the Duke of York's radar sets, the operators peer into their green, glowing scopes, hands moving over dials and gain controls, compensating for the weather. The Arctic storm paints the screens with clutter, but gradually a single solid contact emerges. Surface vessel, bearing 295, a radar officer call. Range 3, 5,000 yards. Fraser steps closer, listening intently. 30, 5,000 yards, just under 18 nautical mile. Too far to shoot with real effect in this weather, but close enough to stalk. Steady as she goes, he orders. Close in, slowly. Duke of York's massive hull pushes forward, bow knifing through swells, decks wet and slick with freezing spray. Her escorts remain in station around her, their own radars searching the dark. The brightest close the gap in careful increments. Range 30,000 comes the next call. Fraser's answer is the same, patience. He knows something Bay does not. Scharnhorst is still blind. That first radar hit has left the German ship groping through the dark while brightest sets quietly plot her path. On Scharnhorst's bridge, the mood is the opposite. The star shells of the initial skirmish have faded behind them. The enemy cruisers are no longer visible. The storm feels, to some, like a friend again, covering their escape. Bay and his men believe that the worst of the battle is over. They steam south, engines pounding, pointed toward the safety of port and the long black line of the Norwegian coast. Around them, there is only darkness, snow, and the deep throb of Scharnhorst's own machinery. No one on board suspects that ahead, farther south, another British battleship is silently cutting across their path. Back in Duke of York's radar room, the range ticks down, 20,000 yards. The tension on the bridge tightens. Men lean toward their instruments. In this weather at these ranges, it will be a challenge even for their forte, Ninch guns, to land a decisive hit. Everything depends on the radar solution and fire control. Fraser keeps his voice level. Patience, he repeats. Hold her steady. We let him walk into it. Slowly, unseen, the British battleship and her group plow through the rough Arctic seas, closing in, radar beams slicing through snow and spray. 11,000 yards, the radar officer calls at last. The range is now inside full battle distance. In these conditions, it is as close to point blank as a battleship engagement will get. Fraser straightens. Take aim. Below decks, Duke of York's main armament stirs. 3 great turrets and 14-inch guns in total begin to train toward the predicted position of the enemy. Their rotation is slow, deliberate, each enormous barrel elevating fraction by fraction as the fire control team computes the firing solution from radar data and ballistic tables. On a nearby cruiser, AIMS Jamaica, gun crews stand ready with star shells, designed not to kill but to reveal. Fraser gives the next order, signal Jamaica, star shell illumination my mark. Scharnhorst, still unaware, steams directly into the jaws of the trap. On Bay's bridge, the mood has shifted to a wary normal. Watches rotate. Reports come in from below engines running smoothly, damage from the earlier engagement contained. The sea and sky remain their enemies, but the British guns seem left behind. And then ahead of them, the night blossoms into cruel white fire. A new pattern of star shells arcs up into the black, from somewhere unseen in the darkness in front of their course. They burst high above the waves, pouring down a relentless, searching light that washes over Scharnhorst's bow and superstructure. The German officers on the bridge freeze, eyes snapping to the source. It is not behind them this time. It is dead ahead. In that same instant, Fraser gives his final, simple command. Fire. Duke of York's 10 14-inch guns speak as one. The British battleship convulses with the recoil of a full broadside. Great tongues of flame blast from the muzzles into the storm, followed by a rolling, thunderous boom that seems to tear at the very air. Shells the weight of small cars leap from the barrels, their courses bent by wind and gravity across the black, seething sea. On Scharnhorst, as the artificial daylight of the star shells throws every rivet and rail into hard relief, the first British salvo arrives. The men on deck and bridge see the incoming splashes and flashes in horrifying clarity. Great white towers of water erupt around the hull. Steel shrieks as near, misses hammer the sea beside them, then one shell does not miss. A single 40-inch projectile smashes straight into the forward part of Scharnhorst, punching into Anton. The foremost main turret. The impact is sickening, a concentrated, brutal violence of steel against steel. Inside Anton, everyone dies in an instant. On the bridge, they feel the hit as a deep, gut-level blow. There is a muffled explosion from forward, a shudder through the hull. Reports start to come in at once, chaotic, incomplete. Anton hit, no response from the turret. Bay knows what that means. A burning, wrecked turret forward means the magazines below are at risk. If a fire reaches the stored propellant and shells, the entire forward half of the battleship could go up. There is only one way to be sure. Flood Bruno's magazines, comes the order from gunnery, passed quickly with Bay's grim nod. The second forward turret, Brun, was still intact for the moment, but the risk of sympathetic detonation is too great. Flooding its magazines will make it useless until they can drain and reset them. Deep inside the ship, valves are open. Cold seawater starts to pour into Bruno's magazine spaces, sacrificing firepower for survival. On the British side, Duke of York reloads, fire control already adjusting range and bearing. The rain of steel is only beginning. Bay looks out into the blinding wash of star shell light, processing the geometry in a heartbeat. Cruisers behind him, a battleship ahead of him, he is being bracketed, trapped. He cannot turn back. The cruisers from earlier are still somewhere astern, waiting to pounce if he swings north again. Charging straight at Duke of York would be suicide at this range, guns crippled, radar blind. There is only one escape route left, to the east, trying to slip sideways out of the tightening net. Hard to port, he orders, "Bring us round east." Scharnhorst heels as she turns, hull fighting the combined force of rudder and sea. Her surviving aft guns begin to respond, training toward the muzzle flashes that betray Duke of York's position. For now, only Caesar, the last full turret, can speak with her main guns. Even so, they load and fire as fast as the battered systems allow, hurling heavy shells back at the British giant. Around Scharnhorst, the sea explodes with brightest fire. Another 40-inch shell slams into her superstructure, tearing through armor and metal. This one does not hit a turret instead. It rips through upper works, smashing equipment, starting a savage fire that licks upward and outward, feeding hungrily on anything that will burn. Flames claw at the winter air, fueled by paint, insulation, and splintered fittings. Smoke billows, whipped away by the gale. Men cough and choke as they scramble to fight the blaze, dragging hoses, slamming watertight doors, shouting in the roar of wind and fire. In the confusion, amid reports and counter-reports, someone realizes a critical fact. Bruno isn't burning, comes the call. We flooded the magazine for nothing. The terrible forward turret, once silenced for safety, may yet be saved. Word reaches the command in fragments. After a moment's hesitation, just long enough to be certain the risk is acceptable, order goes back. Drain Bruno, bring her back online. Deep in the ship, pumps roar to life, forcing water out of the magazine spaces. Men work in half-flooded compartments, boots splashing, hands numb with cold, fighting to get the second turret back into the battle. Above, Scharnhorst continues her desperate turn and her headlong flight, under fire from the flanks and from astern, her world reduced to smoke, flame, and the crash of incoming brightest shells. Bruno comes back to life slowly, like a giant waking under ice. In the forward turret, pumps fight to clear the last of the seawater. Crewmen scramble back to their stations, boots sloshing, breath steaming in the cold, as the turret captain shouts orders. Motors hum, gears engage. The great guns begin to elevate again. Bruno ready for action. Comes the call, triumph threaded with exhaustion. On the bridge, Bay feels a flicker of relief. At least now he has two working turrets again. Anton gone, but Bruno and Caesar still able to speak. It is something to throw back at the brightish wall of fire ahead and astern. Scharnhorst's turn to the east continues. Shell splashes rise around her in huge white pillars. The sea is a minefield of water and steel. From Duke of York, the brightest gunners and radar men work together like a single organism, feeding in range, bearing, wind, motion of both ships. Each salvo they fire tightens the noose. One of those salvos reaches out and catches Scharnhorst again, this time from the flank. A 14-inch shell slams into the side near Bruno's barbette. The shock is immense. Inside the turret, there is a deafening, concussive blast, followed by instant darkness and choking smoke. Men are thrown from their feet, ears ring, lamps burst. The air is full of hot metal fragments, dust, and the bitter stench of propellant. Fire and Bruno evacuate, someone screams. The crew stumbles and crawls out through smoke. Filled passageways, coughing, eyes streaming, some half, deaf from the pressure wave. Turret systems flicker, some dead, some erratic. For now, Bruno is out of the fight again, reduced from a proud main gun to a burning steel coffin that must be abandoned until damage control can re-enter. On the surface, Scharnhorst pushes to absolute maximum power. Every shaft, every boiler is driven as hard as her engineers dare. The whole hull vibrates with the strain, frosted railings buzz under gloved hands, her wake glows white in the starlit darkness as she runs, leaning into the seas at a speed few ships can match. Aft, Caesar works without pause, its guns roaring, throwing heavy shells at Duke of York whenever the bearing allows. Between salvos, brightest shells crash down nearby, shaking the German gun crews, showering them with splinters and spray. On Duke of York's bridge, Admiral Fraser watches the German battleship's track with a narrowing gaze. Scharnhorst is not simply turning away, no, she is slowly increasing the range, inch by inch, yard by yard. Every minute that passes sees the German contact slipping farther into the darkness and snow. "How's our shooting?" Fraser asks quietly. "Spotty, sir," comes the measured answer from gunnery. Conditions and range were straddling, not many confirmed hits. He doesn't need numbers to see the truth. The longer range brackets on the plotting table, the slow drift of the pencil marks, it all tells him the same story. The prey is starting to pull away. Then, in the middle of this tense pursuit, the tables tilt. An incoming German salvo from Caesar reaches out across the Arctic and finds Duke of York. There is a massive clang and a judder as one of Scharnhorst's shells slams into the British battleship. The whole structure seems to flex. Men on the bridge feel it in their bones. Alarms start shouting. Across compartments, reports flare. In the radar shack, the operators see their main display flicker, then sag. Equipment jars off mounts. A key antenna array somewhere above has taken the shock. A breathless rating bursts into the bridge. "Sir, we've lost the radar. For a heartbeat, silence hangs. Without that radar, Duke of York's fire control is effectively blind in this storm." No eyes, no precise range, no accurate gunnery, just guesses in the snow. Fraser's jaw clenches. "Get it back," he says. "Make repairs, and fast." Down in the radar space is Lieutenant Hare. Old Bates already knows the situation is bad. He stares up the ladder toward the mast, imagining the damage even before he sees it. The set's behavior readings sliding off, antenna drooping on the indicator, tells him enough. He doesn't wait for a written order. There's no time for that. He slams his cap tighter on his head, then thinks better of no, hell lose it anyway, and starts to climb. Outside, the storm is a living thing. As Bates emerges into the Arctic gale, the wind hits him like a wall. Snow and freezing spray scour his face raw, cutting into any exposed skin like knives. His gloved hands seize cold metal rungs on the mast and start hauling him up, one step at a time. Above him, the damaged radar antenna hangs slightly off, no longer perfectly aligned. That tiny mechanical misalignment means the difference between a clear picture and blind firing into the night. He climbs and the ship fires. Each time Duke of York's 14-inch guns roar, the whole hull trembles. Shockwaves rip through the air around the mast. Bates is buffeted by invisible hammers of pressure, his body jolted against the steel. He has to cling with everything he has not to be torn free and flung into the black ocean below. He keeps going. Up and up. On the main deck and inside the ship, British sailors continue to work their guns and instruments. With radar down to a crawl and the German battleship running hard, hit chances shrink with every passing salvo. Back on Scharnhorst, Bay can feel the change. The British fire is still dangerous, but not as precise. Shells fall more erratically, their patterns wider. Caesar's gunners swear they have scored at least one telling hit on Duke of York. The range is starting to open. On the German plotting boards, the separation is clear. Each new bearing place shows them inching farther from the battleship that ambushed them. To Bay, it begins to look like escape. He stands braced on his bridge, the ship's motion thrumming through his boots. Around him, the storm rages. His men are exhausted, and shaken parts of his ship burn or lie twisted and shattered. But the engines are still delivering unbelievable power, and the speed readouts remain high. This way, he thinks. Just a little longer at this speed, and we slip out of their reach. The British, though, are not giving up. Fraser orders his group to steer hard east, trying to match and cut across Scharnhorst's stern. All ahead, they push their machinery, forcing old hulls and engines through hostile seas at punishing power. To the north, British cruisers, never entirely shaken off, are also turning, maintaining contact and closing the pincer. Deep inside Scharnhorst, German technicians return to Bruno's blackened, smoke-filled turret. Damage control parties force their way in with breathing gear and lanterns. They find scorched steel, shattered equipment, and pockets of flame that they attack with hoses and extinguishers. Somehow, amid the wreckage, vital gear survives. Fighting fatigue and fear, The teams begin coaxing Bruno back toward life, again rewiring, resetting, nursing motors. Slowly, stubbornly, status lights begin to wink on. Elevation gears turn with a groan, then more smoothly. Ammunition hoists judder, then move. Bruno returning to operation. Comes the report, ragged but triumphant. Bay seizes on it. 2 main turrets again, however battered. More guns to answer Duke of York's iron rain. As soon as Bruno can bear, its guns start to fire, adding their flashes to those of Caesar, hurling German steel back across the distance toward brightish silhouettes flickering in star shell glow. Up on Duke of York's mast, Bates finally reaches his target. The radar antenna looms above him, huge and delicate all at once, its framework rimed with ice, slewed slightly off from where it should be. The metal is slick with freezing spray. His fingers are numb, he can barely feel the rungs. Another broadside erupts from the battleship below. The concussion hammers him, nearly prying his fingers loose. The mast shudders. He clamps his body tighter, lungs burning in the freezing air. He wedges himself into a precarious position and leans into the frozen metal of the antenna mount. With every bit of strength he has, he begins to push. It is like trying to shift a building. The resistance is immense. Wind tears at him, trying to rip him backward. Snow blinds his eyes. His muscles scream. He pushes again. Something gives. The antenna assembly shifts a fraction. Then another. Below in the radar shack, one of the operators stares at his screen in surprise as the smear of static and rolling clutter twitches, corrects and tightens. A clear contact begins to reemerge. Bates clamps the assembly in its corrected position as best he can, holding on until the mechanics below can brace it. His body aches, his face is numb. The guns thunder again and again beneath him as the ship continues to fight. Suddenly, in the warmth of Duke of York's radar room, the display blooms with purpose once more. Contact regained, an operator calls. Range 2,000 yards. A runner sprints this information to the bridge. Radar reports Scharnhorst at 2,000 yards. Sir, Fraser nods sharply. 2,000 yards, over 10 nautical miles. Well within the theoretical range of his guns, but still a very difficult shot in this hellish weather. It is, however, a chance. Correct and fire, he orders. Quickly, fire control officers adjust their dials and inputs with furious concentration. The new, more accurate radar ranges feed into predictors, compensating for Scharnhorst's speed, the wind, the roll, the shell flight time. Turrets elevate a little higher, their great barrels tracking invisible points in the storm. Duke of York fires again. 14-inch shells scream up into the night, vanishing into the snow and darkness. For 30 long seconds they are out there, tiny and massive all at once, arcs of steel traveling through freezing air over black water. On Scharnhorst, the German crew hears the distant roar of the brightish salvo. They brace, some ducking instinctively as the seconds stretch. Then the shells arrive. One shell comes in at just the wrong angle, just the wrong moment for the German ship. It slams through Scharnhorst's thin upper beltar, or a line of defense, never meant to fully resist such massive projectiles. The shell punches through metal and structure, then plunges downward into the depths of the ship. It detonates in boiler room number 1. The explosion is a brutal, confined eruption of force. Boiler casings rupture, pipes burst, superheated steam and shrapnel scythe through the compartment. Machinery that stood roaring moments before is torn apart or wrenched from its mountings. The shock of the hit runs through the entire hull. Lights flicker, the deck jumps underfoot. On the bridge, Bay grabs the chart table to steady himself. Damage report, he demands, voice sharp. The answer comes, strained and grim. Severe loss of steam, we've slowed to 8 knots, 8 knots. From racing at near 30, Scharnhorst is suddenly crawling. In the Arctic, under the guns of a brightish battle fleet, 8 knots might as well be stopped. Bay closes his eyes for a heartbeat. He understands at once, with the cold clarity of a seasoned commander, what that means. The tactical board in his mind shifts. At 8 knots, he cannot outrun the brightish. He cannot maneuver freely. He cannot dictate any part of this engagement. He is now a slow, wounded target in a trap that is closing from multiple directions. He knows it's over, but surrender is not in the book tonight. Radio, he says quietly. Prepare a transmission. The signal is short, simple, defiant. "We will fight to the last shell. Long live Germany." The words pulse out into the storm on German frequencies, a final statement of intent from a ship and a commander who have run out of options. Below decks, German engineers do not stop. They attack the damage-in boiler room, one with everything they have, fighting collapsing steam lines, rerouting flow, bringing other boilers and turbines up to their absolute limits. Slowly, painfully, Scharnhorst's speed begins to rise again. 8 knots becomes 10, then 15, 20. At last, straining machinery, squealing under overload, they push her back up to around 22 knots. It is a heroic achievement, but in the face of pursuing cruisers and a battleship already on their track, it is not enough. At 22 knots, Scharnhorst is still slower than she was, slower than she needs to be to break free. And as she bleeds speed and time, the geometry of the battle shifts against her in another way. She is now within ideal hunting speed for a different kind of weapon. Torpedoes, British destroyer smaller, faster, built to run in close, can now attack in ways they could not when Scharnhorst was racing away at her full best speed. The wounded battleship, no longer a gray blur in the night, becomes a big, badly hurt animal surrounded by lean, deadly predators. From the north, the brightest ships that had been shadowing earlier now close in to join Duke of York's main force. The circle tightens around Scharnhorst. Multiple sets of eyes and radars mark her position. She is no longer just under fire from one direction. She is surrounded. On Scharnhorst's bridge, reports stack up. Multiple enemy contacts, different bearings. Flickers of gunfire in more than one quadrant. Splashes from various calibers bracket them. Bay knows what comes next. "Focus on the destroyers," he orders harshly. "Do not let them close. Their torpedoes will finish us if they get in range." The order goes out to his secondary batteries. The 15-centimeter gun's less powerful than the main armament, but quicker to train and fire swing toward fast, low silhouettes on the horizon. Targeting data is passed rapidly, gunners squinting through optics blurred by snow and spray. They pick one destroyer, one among the 4 closing in, and concentrate fire. Shells flash out, bursting around the incoming brightest ship, throwing up columns of water and steel fragments. That destroyer staggers under the barrage, forced to dodge, its decks erupting in spray, but there are too many. 2 other British destroyers make their run, using the chaos, the flashes, and the wounded Scharnhorst's reduced speed to slip into their own attack positions. They close the range with terrifying speed, bows punching through the dark, icy sea, torpedo tubes bearing. Gunnery officers shout bearings and ranges. Torpedo crews swing their mounts to the correct angles, fingers cold on firing levers. Then, at the right moment, they unleash. 8 torpedoes surge from those first 2 destroyers, leaving white wakes that fan out toward Scharnhorst like ghostly trails. German lookouts scream warnings. The helm comes over, engines adjust, but a wounded battleship cannot dance like a destroyer. One British torpedo finds its mark. It slams into Scharnhorst with a dull, massive thud below the waterline. The hull shudders as a column of water, steel, and explosive force tears inward. Internal bulkheads groan. Men are hurled against walls and decks. Somewhere below, compartments flood in an instant, black Arctic water pouring through torn seams. The ship keeps moving, but slower, more labored. There is no time to breathe. The 2 remaining British destroyers now sprint in for their own attack, turning their lean hulls into the path that will give them the best spread. 12 more torpedoes streak into the sea. On Scharnhorst, alarms blare, orders and counter orders fill the air. Damage control parties, already stretched from shellfire and previous hits, now struggle to locate, isolate, and contain new flooding as quickly as they can. But the ocean is merciless. 1 torpedo slams into her port side, 3 more smash into starboard, all in quick, brutal succession. Each impact is its own hammer blow, each one tearing new wounds into the already battered hull. Metal screams, frames bend, decks heave. The ship shudders and groans under the onslaught. Lights flicker as circuits break. Below the waterline, more compartments flood. Pumps roar, but the incoming tide is massive. Scharnhorst's speed bleeds away again, dropping down toward 10 knots. On the bridge, under the dim red emergency lighting and the occasional violent flare of explosions outside, Bay feels the ship sluggish beneath him, the deck no longer thrumming with earlier ferocity. He refuses to simply take the blows. Launch torpedoes, he orders, voice cutting through the chaos. We turn, prepare a torpedo attack. If he is to die, he will at least try to bite. Helm and engine answer, bringing Scharnhorst about as best they can, trying to put her own torpedo tubes into an attack bearing against the closing British forces. Torpedo crews on the German ship rush to ready their weapons, but the great battleship is too hurt. Flooded compartments, damaged systems, and the slow roll of a wounded hull make everything harder. Mechanisms jam. Power fails and is rerouted. The angle is wrong, the time too short. In the end, only a single German torpedo leaves its tube, rushing out into the Black Sea. It misses, knifing harmlessly through dark water, failing to find a target in the chaotic ballet of ships in wake. The British destroyers, emboldened, hold their positions, rearming and preparing for yet another run, while the heavy guns of Duke of York and the other ships continue to hammer Scharnhorst without mercy. Even amid this growing catastrophe, the German secondary guns keep up their desperate defiance, tracking and firing, trying to ward off the destroyers as best they can. Caesar, the last proud turret of Scharnhorst's main armament, still throwing shells at any British ship she can bear on, as the sea and sky burn around her. Caesar keeps firing, her 3 big guns cycling as fast as battered machinery and shaken men can manage. Each salvo blasts out into the Arctic night, flashes tearing open the darkness, barrels recoiling, steel trembling. Shells arc toward the British ring, tightening around them, each one a small chance at survival. Around Scharnhorst, British ships answer with their own fire. Duke of York continues to hurl 14-inch shells, while cruisers and destroyers add their lighter but faster batteries to the storm. The sea is a continuous curtain of splashes, fire, and smoke. In the midst of this chaos, one of Caesar's salvos finds a target. A British destroyer, pressing in too close, suddenly takes a hit. On that small ship, plates buckle, men are thrown to the deck, alarms scream. The destroyer staggers, her silhouette briefly wreathed in smoke and spray. On Scharnhorst's decks, some of the German crew see it and shout, a rough cheer cutting through the thunder for a heartbeat. Even wounded and surrounded, their last turret can still hit back. But the sea is full of enemies. The other British destroyers do not break off. They use the momentary distraction and their own superior maneuverability to slip closer once again, darting in like wolves at a limping stag. They push forward into the maelstrom, bows knifing through torn, white-capped seas, closing the range to point-blank torpedo distance. Guns thunder around them, shell splashes leap high. They press on, committed. At this proximity, there is no easy turn away. On Scharnhorst's bridge, Bay hears the new reports, feels the change in the ship's motion as more hits land, sees the flickering flames and spasms of shell impacts all around. His secondary guns are still firing wherever they can. 15 mounts tracking the weaving destroyers, hurling shells in desperate patterns. But he knows what those small silhouettes are trying to do. They are coming in for the kill. The final attack run begins. From the destroyer's decks, torpedo tubes are swung to their firing bearings, metal creaking under the strain, crews shouting over the roar of wind and guns. Range closes in hundreds of yards now, not thousands. Scharnhorst looms ahead and to the side, a huge, battered mountain of steel, burning in places, half hidden in spray and smoke. Then the orders cut through, stand by torpedoes fire. A last lethal pattern of torpedoes leaves their tubes, white tracks streaking across the black water towards Scharnhorst. At this range, the run is brutally short. On the German battleship, lookouts scream warnings, but there is almost no time left to react. The helm tries to answer, but with flooding, damage, and reduced speed, the great ship can no longer dodge as she once could. The first torpedo hits, then the second, then the third, fourth, and fifth. 5 torpedoes slam into Scharnhorst's hull in savage succession at point-blank distances. Each impact is a deep, gut-wrenching blow. Underwater, explosions carve into the ship's side, tearing vast rents in armor and plating. Entire internal spaces are ripped open to the sea. The deck shivers with every strike. Men are thrown against bulkheads, lights flare and die, pipes burst. Deep within the ship, dark water roars into compartments, cold and unstoppable. Caesar, which was the first turret to fire at the opening of the battle, now pays the price for being the last one still in the fight. Shockwaves from the torpedo detonations twist and wrench her support structure. Fragments and secondary damage from shells and internal failures reach her as well. Mechanisms seize, power flickers, one final salvo struggles out, then the great guns grind to a halt. Crews inside and around the turret feel systems failing. Hydraulic lines rupture, gears jam, smoke seeps in. Orders to keep firing meet the cold reality of warped steel and dead machinery. At last, Caesar falls silent. With her final turret dead, Scharnhorst's main batteries are gone. Only scattered secondary guns and isolated mounts continue to bark stubbornly at the encircling brightest ships, more a reflex of defiance than a threat that can change the outcome. Below decks, the picture grows worse by the second. Huge volumes of seawater pour into the many holes torn by shells and torpedoes. Damage control parties fight as best they can, closing hatches, shoring up bulkheads, starting pumps, but each new explosion undermines their work. Compartments flood faster than they can be sealed. Pumps fall silent as power lines drown or snap. The ship begins to list. At first, it is a slight lean, barely felt by those already used to the violent motion of battle and sea. Then it grows more pronounced. Tables slide, loose gear skitters across decks. Men have to brace against bulkheads as the floor tilts under their boots. On the bridge, Bay feels it clearly. The world under him is no longer level. The starboard side is sinking, inch by inch, into the black, frigid ocean. Around him, the bridge crew still call out bearings, range estimates, damage reports professional, automatic. Some stare straight ahead, some glance down nervously at the angled deck. Outside, Scharnhorst is burning. Flames lick from shattered superstructure, fed by wind even as the sea creeps higher along her flanks. The night around her is a patchwork of fire and darkness, illuminated by the last, fading star shells and occasional gun flashes from the brightest ring, now holding back to watch her die. Still, some German guns fire on, more out of sheer will than coordination. Tracers arc out drunk angles from tilting mounts. No one on Scharnhorst is under any illusions now. The ship is doomed. Standing on his bridge with his vessel leaning heavily to starboard beneath him, Konteradmiral Erich Bay sees and feels the truth in every shudder of the hull. They have fought as hard as they could. Speed, surprise, and courage were not enough against radar, numbers, and torpedoes. The battle is lost. He makes his final command decision. Abandon ship, he orders quietly. The words roll through the ship over loudspeakers and shouted relays. Men react in different ways. A moment of stunned disbelief, a quick prayer, a curse. A brief, fierce embrace between comradescent training and instinct take over. Hatches are opened where they still can be. Liferafts and Carly floats are cut free and hurled toward the oil, slicked, freezing water. Wounded are helped or carried toward exits. Some choose their own way into the sea rather than wait for the decks to go under them. All around, the list worsens. Scharnhorst lurches more sharply to starboard, her starboard rail cutting closer to the waves. Water rushes over parts of the main deck, foaming and swirling as it claims more of the great ship. British guns fall mostly silent now, except for occasional shots to hasten the inevitable. The destroyers and larger ships keep station at a careful distance. They do not want to be too close when a sinking battleship's boilers, magazines, or structures fail entirely. On Duke of York's bridge, Admiral Fraser watches in a silence heavier than any shout. Through the broken veil of snow and smoke, he sees Scharnhorst in her death throes. The proud Kriegsmarine battleship that had once outpaced and threatened convoys now rolls steadily to starboard, her silhouette distorted, her lines ruined by blast and flame. The bow goes first. With a slow, terrible grace, Scharnhorst's bow dips under, pulled down by flooded compartments and torn steel. Water boils and foams around the forward superstructure as it slides beneath the surface. The angle grows steeper. As the bow vanishes, the stern lifts rising into the air. Men on both sides see the big propellers lifted partly clear of the water, still turning slowly, uselessly. as if the ship herself refuses to admit death even now. The rudders hang exposed, dripping, then swing under as the tilt accelerates. Cold Arctic water cascades down the battleship's hull as she slides further under, stern following the bow into the depths. Within moments, the last parts of Scharnhorst disappear beneath the black surface, leaving only wreckage, swirling oil, and scattered men in the freezing sea. The noise of battle fades, replaced by the howl of wind and the distant cries of survivors struggling in water that will kill in minutes. British ships move cautiously closer, now shifting from destruction to rescue where they can. Later, aboard Duke of York, in the weary quiet that follows action, Admiral Fraser addresses his officers and men. "Gentlemen," he tells them, voice measured, "our battle with Scharnhorst has ended in victory for us." He pauses, letting that stark truth sit with everyone who has fought, risked, and watched. "But I hope," he continues, "that if any of you are ever called upon to take a ship into action against an opponent many times your superior, you will command her as gallantly as Scharnhorst was commanded today." The words are not flattery, they are professional respect from one fighting sailor to another, acknowledging courage even in an enemy. Out in the dark, the sea rolls on over the place where Scharnhorst went down. Of her 960, 8-man crew, only 36 are pulled alive from the water by British ships. The rest officers and ratings, veterans and young conscripts alike are claimed by the Arctic. Konteradmiral Erich is not among the survivors. In the end, the fast German battleship that carved through the rough Arctic seas looking for merchant prey dies, surrounded, slowed, and overwhelmed, but defiant to the last. For the Allies, her loss removes a potent raider from the northern seas and helps secure the hard, cold lifeline of convoys to the Soviet Union. For the men who were there on both sides, it becomes a memory etched in snow, steel, and fire, the night Scharnhorst made her final run. If you've watched this far, consider this. What mattered more in this battle of technology and radar, or the choices and courage of the people on those decks? Let me know in the comments what moment of Scharnhorst's last fight struck you the most, and whether you think anything could have changed her fate that night. If you enjoyed this story and want more deep dive naval engagements, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us which ship or battle you want to see next. And when you're ready for another brutal close quarters encounter at sea, check out our video when a destroyer rammed a U-boat and left the crew in the water.